Okay, so I was on the internet just scrolling around and browsing through Twitter. By the way, follow me on Twitter if you haven't already. And I remember I scrolled through a tweet where basically everyone was making fun of Mr. Beast's friend that became, well, I guess a girl? I'm not really sure. To be honest, I didn't go through the research, to be honest, and I'm not really here to speak upon it because, well, it's not really my place to say, or I guess say my feelings on basically Chris, a friend of Mr. Beast, changing his identity, I guess in some way. I'm not really sure. But one thing I can say is that I have a really relatable story to this, and honestly, you guys are about to hear it. But before we get into it, make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Seriously, it means a lot when you guys do. And on top of that, I am currently live streaming live on Kick and talking to you guys and probably hanging out and just telling more crazy stories just like this one. So if you want to watch that, make sure you guys go to kick.com/Bubba. Anyways, other than that, let's get straight into this insane story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story takes place, funny enough, back when I was actually really young. I was in grade 5, and I remember I used to have a really good friend. Now, this friend of mine, he was actually a homie, and to be honest, me and him were like really close. Like to the point where I guess our families knew each other, and like you could say he was a family friend, but in reality, we met through school. And our parents met each other's parents, well, through us. So you know that like bond was really close because, you know, when you were younger and you wanted your friends to become friends with, you know, another person's parents, it was never easy to do that. But I remember me and this guy somehow did it, and me and him, we would go karting together. We'd have a lot of fun. We'd have a lot of sleepovers, and our parents were always cool with it because, well, they knew we were friends. So remember that bond. It's very important to the story. Now, I want to say that was like back when we were younger, but I want to say when we got to middle school, one thing I started realizing is that he started to change. Now, by change, I mean he started being less, well, I don't want to say this in any way wrong, and by the way, if there's anyone that is a part of the LGBTQ community in the comments down below, feel free to correct me in any way, shape, or form. I don't take offense to anything, and I apologize if I maybe get the wrong idea. I will say this much, I'm not that well educated in the LGBTQIA system of things, but basically, I remember back when we were kids, he used to be always really physical. And by physical, I mean like, you know, we would do like fights, we would pretend we were in the WWE, we would do really masculine things. But as we went to middle school, well, he started being a lot more different. Like, for example, I remember when we were playing like, you know, like video games, for example, he would always want to play games that, well, are more feminine. And before anyone says anything, yes, I know that, you know, all games are unisex and stuff like that. I understand completely. I'm just saying back when we were younger, or back then when we were, I want to say before the whole LGBTQ era really started dawning upon us, I want to say like back then, you know, it was very obvious to what was more masculine, what was more feminine. And remember, I grew up in this way, so just get used to it. Anyways, going on though, he started changing slowly, and me and him started to hang out less and less. He started hanging out with more girls lately, and I thought that was kind of cool. But then I started to realize that when he would hang out with girls, he wouldn't do it to, you know, do the devil's tango or flirt with them. He would do it just because he was actually becoming friends with them. Now, I remember one of my friends back when I was also in middle school, he was like another friend that wasn't really that close with me like this guy was. But I remember he ended up walking up behind me as I was looking at basically my close friend talking to a bunch of chicks down the hallway, and as I was staring at them, I remember this guy walks up to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, huh, what do you know? Your friend's a gay best friend. How do you feel about that? And then he ended up basically tapping my shoulder and walking away. I really didn't understand what he meant by that, but honestly, it didn't sound like good news. So I remember what I decided to do is I decided to walk over there and, you know, see what's going on and why this guy's talking to a bunch of girls. And I started to realize that in reality, these girls were planning, like, I don't know, to do makeup on him and stuff. I don't know, to be honest. And I didn't really want to be part of that conversation because that's really girly. At least that's what I thought back when I was in middle school. So I ended up just walking away and going to the playground playing Foursquare. Going on from there though, I want to say like 2 weeks went by in middle school, and I remember one day I ended up seeing my friend come to school, my really close friend that I thought he was, and basically he was wearing nail polish. He was wearing black nail polish, and I thought this was some kind of emo, like, you know, goofy phase that he was going through maybe. But when I walked up to him and said, yo bro, like, why'd you paint your nails? He looked at me and he spoke kind of weirdly saying, oh yeah, like these are like my cool nails. Don't they look so pretty? Pretty? Wait, what? At this point, to be honest, he started changing. He started becoming a totally different person. And he wasn't the same person from when I met back when I was a kid. So I remember it got to the point where me and him, we didn't hang out much anymore. We kind of spread it apart. We didn't really even be friends anymore, I guess, in some way. And then I remember one time, I want to say this was like a year after, I never invited him over. It's been like over a year. And I remember I was sitting in the dinner table with my family. And I remember my mom looks over at me and says, oh, Bubba, like, how's your friend doing? Is he good? I haven't seen him in a while. Yeah, I guess he's good, is what I said. I didn't really want to tell my parents that he started painting his nails and becoming a girl, I guess, in some way. So I kind of just, you know, just said he's doing all right and he had other things to worry about. Because in reality, it wasn't my place to say what he was doing, or to be honest, I didn't even know myself. Going on from there, though, I want to say like 4 years went by. I went to high school, and I remember when I started high school, I basically ended up, like, you know, doing my high school things. At this point, I was becoming the alpha male that I was always meant to become. I was always doing the devil's tango and all this stuff, and to be honest, I totally changed. Yes, I was still masculine, but I, you know, never really focused on friends as much as I cared about just doing the devil's tango. But then I remember one day when I was just chilling, and I was basically just chilling in the hallway, I remember there was a girl that walked into our school. Now, I remember when I first looked at this girl, she looked familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And to be honest, I was kind of curious of who it was. So I remember I kind of like followed her down the hallway to kind of see, like, you know, do I actually recognize this chick? Have I done this girl before? So I ended up following her, kind of like trying to figure out who this was. And then I remember out of nowhere, this girl just turns around and says, are you following me? Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean. And right at that moment, I paused. Middle of a sentence. I looked at her eyes, and that's when I realized, holy cow, my best friend became a dude. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to say. I remember I just looked at him and said, what happened? I remember she looks at me kind of odd and says, what do you mean, Baba? I mean, like, what happened to you is what I said. I remember she kind of took that offensively and said, I've always been this way. No, you haven't, is what I told her afterwards. And then it became a really, well, awkward situation because people started looking. At that moment, I remember I yelled in the hallway saying, 1 minute you were a dude that was my best friend back when we were younger, and now you're a woman? I remember she looked at me and she started tearing up. And actually, she ran away. I remember at that point, I didn't know what to say. I felt bad, but at the same time, I was upset. He basically changed himself to become, well, something biologically he wasn't, I guess, in some way. That was my thought process back in high school. Understand this, that back when I was younger and still now, I never understood the LGBTQIA community or how anything works. Obviously, nowadays, I'm doing research into it, so I try to be less offensive during these stories because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But at the same time, like, you gotta understand, from a person that never really understood the LGBTQIA community and knowing that he was my best friend, it changed me. It changed my thought process and everything. It made me upset. Okay, I was really upset. I remember everyone looked over at me, kind of just shaking their head thinking, wow, like, he really just said that in front of her. And at that point, I didn't know what to say. I remember after school that day, I went home and I was just upset and everything. And then out of nowhere, when I was just sitting at home playing video games on my Xbox One, there was a knock on my door. There was a knock on my door, and I remember I didn't know who it was, but my mom ended up answering the door and saying, Baba, come up here. I ended up going upstairs and I looked at who was at the door, and it was my friend's dad basically looking at me saying, you know what you did to my daughter, right? What do you mean? Is what I said. And then he ended up explaining everything to me in the living room. And then after a while, the dad ended up calling over his daughter, I guess. And basically, we had a sit down talk about how basically she ended up transitioning and she ended up becoming, well, a female, or identifying as a female. To be honest, I never understood it. And in my mind, I grew up, you know, learning that, you know, transgenderism was like a mental illness. I don't know. To this day, I'd never understood it. And I still don't. But me looking on the internet nowadays and seeing how, like, you know, Chris is becoming, well, unidentified, and basically, you know, Carl and Mr. Beast's friends, and even I think Mick Juggernuggets even had a friend who did this as well. Honestly, I'm gonna say this much. Some people want to really express their feelings, and sometimes the best way is to change themselves in ways that no one expected. And I guess for us, well, we just gotta let it happen and not take offense to it, because it's not our place to say what to say to a human being. It really isn't. Anyways, guys, that is basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, fall for more embarrassing stories. Peace out, guys.